Some call Iowa a flyover state. Others say nothing interesting happens here. At Iowa Public Radio, we know there are interesting things worth sharing every day, fresh perspectives waiting to be heard, and that Iowa connection that adds meaningful relevance to what's happening anywhere else in the world. Find your interests, find perspective, find relevance. Find it on IPR.
This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. We have reached peak fall color across the state and leaves are dropping. Raking, of course, is a traditional fall chore, but these days there are almost always better options. This hour, we're going to talk about fallen leaves, fall cleanup, and overwintering tender perennials. Aaron Stile, Iowa State University Extension horticulture specialist, is here. Hello, Aaron.
Good morning.
And Cindy Haynes, professor of horticulture at ISU, is also here. Hello, Cindy.
Good morning.
And Aaron, let's start with those leaves. They were falling like raindrops when I was out for a walk this morning, and it is beautiful. Maybe not the most vibrant fall. I don't think it rivals last year, but we do have a lot of leaves on our lawns. What do we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, we do. And, you know, leaves in general can be left in place whenever possible. It's nice to leave the leaves. But there are a couple of situations where we want to be wary of that, and the lawn is probably the most prominent one. Any leaves that are allowed to kind of accumulate and mat down on the lawn will kill the grass over the winter. And then when it comes to spring, there are a lot of weeds that will happily take over that space. And a lot of those weeds aren't necessarily things that help other insects or pollinators. A lot of them are invasive. It's things like crabgrass and purslane and spurge and some of these other things. So it's nice to make sure that we're not allowing those leaves to smother our lawn. And we can, of course, rake and remove them. That's always an option. And you could rake them into a shrub border, for example, and then at least that organic material is being introduced to a different part of your landscape. It's not completely being removed, or put it in a compost pile or something like that. But one of the easiest things to do is to simply just mow them. As long as you can see the grass when you're done, you're returning that carbon that's in those leaves to the soil. Now, it's not going to replace fertilization for your lawn, but it is going to help along the way. It also helps build healthier soils that support better microbial communities. It is good for soil water retention and for nutrient retention, all of those kinds of things too. So it has a lot of benefits. We just want to make sure we're not allowing the leaves to smother our grass.
All right. So as long as you can see the grass, you're probably okay. I would much rather mulch and, take the mower out one last time or maybe even twice than spend all that time raking. And if it's beneficial to my lawn, that seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. And, you don't have to necessarily, sometimes it can be hard to get them all ground up into your lawn. You can also just bag it and put it in the compost pile. When it's all chopped up like that, it's with a little bit of green material too. It composts very nicely. So that would be another way that you could keep it on site because you're going to use your compost somewhere else, maybe in the spring. And then, maybe reduce the work just a little bit so you can only have to go over it like once instead of like 3 times to make sure they all get ground in.
I think this is a wonderful innovation. The only thing I worry about are kids not getting to jump into leaf piles.
You could still rake them. It's fine.
You can rake, but it's recreational now, right?
Yeah, right.
All right. So once we've taken care of the fall leaves, and we know we have a lot less work to do when it comes to managing those leaves, what else do we need to look at when we think about fall cleanup in our lawn and garden?
Some of the things that you might want to consider for cleanup is those containers that you have annuals in or any of those kinds of things. We do need to kind of take care of them. I mean, there's a hard frost is going to hit most of us, so those annuals will die very quickly. And it might be a good idea to compost them as well. And then sometimes I usually remove the soil from those containers as well, maybe add that to the compost pile or bring those containers in because a lot of containers will crack or bust if they are left outside. So some cleanup of annuals. You also think about overwintering kind of tender perennials like dahlias and cannas. Frost will kill the tops of those. You need to dig those root systems up, dry them out just a little bit, and store them someplace around 50 degrees. Kind of that perfect, I don't know, we always talk about that perfect temperature between 45 and 55, someplace kind of cool, so they can manage through the winter because they will not survive reliably outdoors in Iowa.
Well, and last time we talked about overwintering tender perennials, it was like, oh, anytime now you can start taking care of this. But the clock is really ticking now. So if you haven't done it, like this weekend is it,
the
right?
alarm bell is going off. Yes, it is time to do that if you haven't done that yet.
All right.
Yeah.
What about with your hardier perennials? Is there anything that you need to do this time of year when looking at perennials that are going to overwinter?
Not particularly, unless it's something that you've planted this fall, for example. So if you transplanted something this fall, or if you got some plants at the garden center this fall and you put them in September or maybe even October, if those newly planted things would really benefit from a little bit of extra protection. And often the easiest way to do this is to wait until the ground is nearly frozen, wait until the plant has completely died back, and then layer on top of that. It could be a wood mulch, it could be straw or leaves, but it's a temporary kind of blanket. And what it does is it helps keep the soil from warming up and cooling down all winter we have a nice sunny day in January, the surface of the soil will warm up. And what that does is that over time, it can work out the root system of a plant that's not well established because it's not firmly anchored into the ground yet. So if we can do that, help temper the soil temperature for the winter, and then that's usually end of November for us. Thanksgiving's always kind of in my mind, that's kind of the time when I would do this. And then you would remove all of that stuff in March. And so it's not after all the cold is gone, but it's after the worst of it is gone. And that will help prevent, that material from potentially smothering the top of the perennial crowns or something like that. But those newly planted things, and then some other things that just do it on occasion or do it more naturally. Mums do it naturally. Coral bells do it naturally. Sea thrift is another. Yep. Sometimes I've been seeing more of that in garden centers lately, and that is one that naturally heaves up out of the ground in the winter. And so having a little bit of a protection for those perennials can be really helpful.
We've talked a lot about vegetable garden cleanup, which, of course, if you haven't done it, you should do it. But we haven't talked about fruit trees and maybe some of those other shrubs that we grow fruit on. Is cleanup important there as well?
Cleanup becomes really important on edible crops, fruits, and vegetables when there's been a disease issue. So, and I would say with most fruit crops, if you have any fallen apples or you had problems with disease on your crab apples, doing a good job cleaning up right now as kind of this fall sanitation will set you in a good place for next year. So maybe that source of that disease isn't as prevalent next year. Doesn't mean you're not going to have problems, but it does kind of ward some of that off. So some good cleanup is great. Some, it's kind of hard for some other things. I've got blueberries that I've planted, and I always wait until after they're done fall coloring because they always fall color really, really nicely. So, but then I'm probably going to clean up those leaves, and it will be Thanksgiving before I can kind of get out there and clean up those leaves because I don't want any anthracnose or leaf spots or anything to kind of overwinter in that area or that space.
With some of those perennial edibles, we've got this hard frost coming. Does that mean it's also time to mulch some of those?
Some of the things like asparagus often benefits from a layer of
Yep.
mulch, but sometimes all you have to do is leave the stems in place and all the leaves collect there, and
Right.
it just naturally gets mulched. If it's a really exposed site, they might blow out too, but that can be a nice, we don't need to cut back all that material this time of year. Allow it to sit there. The same is true for rhubarb. Most these perennial edible plants don't have a ton of, especially rhubarb, doesn't have a ton of disease issues.
Right.
Asparagus sometimes has some insect problems like asparagus beetle and some of those things. So if you've had issues with that this year, then you would want to clean up that space. But otherwise, leave that in place because they really do benefit from that little extra layer of mulch.
But you can overdo, right? You don't want to smother these
yeah.
plants.
Right.
Yes, especially if you forget about removing all of this stuff in early spring. And, normally you're putting down, like for the perennials we talked about earlier, some of this stuff, you're putting down a couple inches of mulch, maybe 4 at the most.
Right.
And so, but that's a lot of material on top of the crown of a plant that's trying to start growing again. And so as long as you remember to remove it, or at least just pull it to the side, you don't have to take it out of the garden, just get it off to the side. Then you have less to mulch in the rest of your garden too. It can be really successful that way.
When we talk about perennial edibles, I'm sure that strawberries come to mind. And strawberries are kind of a little bit of a different story. Just briefly, when do we need to worry about mulching our strawberries?
Usually November is when we're mulching. We used to say kind of early November. I'm going to say mid. No, let's get it done before Thanksgiving. So we want to get it done before Thanksgiving comes. And that's because strawberries will start to initiate flowers in the fall. And we want to protect those before those really harsh temperatures come. And we want to protect those for the winter. So, yeah.
Okay,
get it
but we
done
also
pretty soon.
want to harden off those plants. So
We
it's
do.
pretty weather dependent, right?
It is very weather dependent. After this weekend, I think it's going to be okay.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I'm so excited about this weekend. Cindy Haynes is a professor of horticulture at Iowa State University. Aaron Stile, Iowa State University Extension horticulture specialist. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. You can find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. It's probably a good idea to get those bulbs you haven't planted in the ground as well. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Aaron Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.